Welcome to Intellectual Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Dana with the Data, and today we're diving deep into two explosive confrontations that reveal everything about how Black intellects navigate questions of justice, strategy, and moral compromise in America. In one corner, we have Sister Souljah, the uncompromising activist and author who refuses to play nice with systems she sees as fundamentally anti-Black. In another, we have Dr. Cornel West, the beloved philosopher who preaches love, inclusion, and coalition building, even with those he fundamentally disagrees with. But here's what makes this fascinating. We're going to examine two separate debates, where Dr. Cornel West's philosophy of radical inclusion gets challenged from completely different angles. First, by Sister Souljah, back in 1992 on the Phil Donahue show, discussing The Issue is Race, a Crisis in Black and White, addressing Black liberation and white allyship. Then, we're going to go into present day with Norman Finkelstein and Dr. Cornel West in discussion on questions on genocide and moral accountability of Gaza and free speech. What emerges is a portrait of West as someone whose commitment to loving his way through the darkness puts him at odds with more militant voices, and raises profound questions about when inclusion becomes complicity. So let's start with Sister Souljah, because her critique cuts to the heart of West's entire worldview. This isn't just about policy disagreements. This is about the fundamental nature of America and what it means to be Black in this country. Sister Souljah opens with a devastating indictment of American education.
More than just money. It's also an issue of control and curriculum, and what type of African adults are you trying to produce within that school system? I was in the Intelligent and Gifted Children's program. I went to Cornell University Preparatory. I was on welfare, Head Start, free lunch, free breakfast, forced busing for integration. Every single government program ever created, I have been
here you are on the cover of Newsweek magazine. It must have worked.
That's not the point, because I talked about white people. That was why I was on the cover. They were not celebrating my academic victories.
Your point is made.
Right. So my point becomes, Phil, that how you design those programs. In all of the programs that I attended, all of the education that I had, college, public, and otherwise, nobody ever told me that I was an African woman. Nobody ever told me what the history of African people were. Nobody ever told me that America is business, and without business you will have nothing and be nothing. And nobody ever told me how to organize business so that I would be able to develop institutions in my own community. So now the sincerity of all of the programs and all of the education has to be questioned, indicted, and convicted, because the bottom line is that America is not and has never tried to produce African adults who are functional, self-sufficient, who understand their politics, their economics, and their relationship to the world politics and the world economics.
Then she drops her historical bombshell.
And that's what's left out of Mr. Brown's piece. Mm-hmm. See, there was a period of time in this country after Reconstruction where African people owned a lot of land, owned a lot of businesses, and did a lot of things. But what happened was the American government, the Ku Klux Klans, and other organizations organized in smashing that effort.
This is a direct challenge to West's faith in American institutions and his belief in working within the system. Souljah is saying the system is designed to keep Black people dependent and ignorant. Then she drops her historical bombshell. This is where Souljah fundamentally breaks with West's approach. She's not interested in coalition building with people she sees as enemies. She's interested in Black self-determination and separation from white-controlled institutions. Now, West tries to respond with his typical approach, citing Senator Bradley's famous line.
I believe that one is because it's always been bleak for Black people. And the fundamental question first is, how do you build on the best of the legacy of the Black freedom movement, which is a moral issue? We have to look for higher moral ground and then look the realities of power in the face. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, ever since Black folk have been here, our problem has been twofold. Too much poverty, too little self-love. To raise the issue of too much poverty means to raise the question, what is the distribution of power and wealth in our society? We live in a society in which 1% of the population own 37% of the wealth, 10% own 86% of the wealth. So all of those in this room are struggling for crumbs in a certain sense. At the same time, too little self-love, the white supremacist bombardment that Brother Wahad and Sister Souljah are talking about is real. The white supremacist bombardment against Black beauty, African beauty, against Black intelligence, African intelligence, Black capacity, Black dignity. Those two are inseparable but not identical, which means at the same time, and this is what I think when Martin King talked about we're part of one garment of destiny, it was a description of our condition. We don't choose circumstances in which we find ourselves. Right. The ugly history that this brother's talking about is real, but alongside that ugly history are Americans of all hues trying to hammer out democratic institutions because the higher ground is a struggle for democracy. And so the question becomes, no matter how bleak the situation, how do we keep alive a substantive and precious ideal of democracy in light of our present circumstance? And the way in which you do that is to create multiracial coalitions with higher moral ground, but looks at the realities of power and control and wealth. We have no other option, it seems to me. And I refuse to be discouraged. I refuse to be disempowered by anybody who comes along and tells me that we Black folk, with our creativity, with our improvisational sense, do not have the moral courage to link up with other folk who are willing to get us out of the hell in which we find ourselves.
But Sister Souljah absolutely demolishes this position. Her response is surgical. You're making a moral appeal to a country that doesn't have a moral conscience. Then she asks a question that cuts to the heart of West's philosophy.
Are some people who do not agree.
Senator Bradley of the all-white United States Senate said we can't get there unless we all go there together. Sorry, none of us are where he is. That's number one. Number two, you're making a moral appeal to a country that doesn't have a moral conscience. Right. The question becomes that when white people feel serious and angry and upset about abortion, they come out in the thousands up to the millions to say, this is what we believe about abortion. Where is the white outcry against white racism that murders African people all around this entire globe? It doesn't exist. So who are these white good people? I want to meet them.
This is devastating because it challenges West's fundamental assumptions that there are enough good white people to build meaningful coalition with. So Sister Souljah is essentially saying, show me the evidence that these allies actually exist in meaningful numbers. West tries to fall back on pragmatism. That might be all we can get, he says. But Sister Souljah rejects this entirely. Quote, I don't work with all I can get. What I work with is what I have, end quote. She's advocating for Black self-reliance over coalition building, for working with what Black people can control rather than hoping for white allies who may not materialize. But Sister Souljah doesn't stop there. She goes after the very institutions that West has spent his career working within, trying to reform.
want to see them.
You, but sister,
A few is not enough.
But that might be all we can get.
A few, no. And guess what? I don't work with all I can get. What I work with is what I have. Listen, you have to have some confidence in the power of African people amongst ourselves to establish a foundation.
We have.
No, we haven't. We have utter chaos in our cities, and you've got to see
black
that.
Institutions we
You
can build
can have a program. I'm not saying we've built a lot of institutions, and those institutions have not been effective. The majority of millions of African youth in this country are dying mentally, dying spiritually, dying emotionally, dying academically. And you may have a program, Mr. Brown may have a program, but what we got to talk about is an American government that tracks millions of African people who don't go to your program, don't go to Brown's program. Millions of African people, not only here, but all around the world. And if we are not honest enough to say who are our friends, who are our enemies, to know what a friend is, to know what an enemy is, we will constantly be trying to get into people's parties, to shake our butts with them, to get them to like us. And that's not the question. The question is, what can we build amongst ourselves to secure ourselves from our enemies so that we will be able to survive into the future?
This is a direct attack on the kind of institutional work that West represents. She's saying that all of these programs, all of these institutions, all of this coalition building is not working. Black children are still dying, still failing, still being destroyed by the system. Her solution: stop trying to get into people's party, to shake your butts with them, to get them to like us. Instead, focus on what can we build amongst ourselves to secure ourselves from our enemies so that we will be able to survive in the future. Sister Souljah ends with a personal testimony that reveals her own journey.
I'm wise enough to know that if I walk out Washington, D.C. tonight, some black kid in Washington, D.C. is blowing off another black kid's head for a pair of sneakers because the institutions that we're talking about, not the things that we hold up to say, look, this is one example. The institutions that we're talking about are not saving the minds of those African children. That is the honest truth. None of these Negroes saved me. None of these Negroes. Your mother didn't help save you. None of them. You did it by yourself. Listen, you know who saved me? A man named John Desane in Englewood, New Jersey, who told me who I was, who showed me my history, who told me who my enemies were, who let me know that this was not an easy world, who let me know that this was a cold environment, who let me know. What he's not a part of is dilly-dallying with the minds of African children and letting them know what the real situation is in America, where they will be killed if they do not know.
The message is clear. Salvation comes from Black consciousness and Black institutions, not from trying to work with or appeal to white America. Now, you might think this is just about Black liberation politics, but here's what's fascinating. When we jump to the Norman Finkelstein debate, we see West applying the exact same philosophy from 1992 in a completely different context and getting challenged in a remarkable similar ways. Whether it's Sister Souljah asking him to stop appealing to white people who don't care about Black suffering, or Norman Finkelstein asking him to stop including people he sees as child killers. West's response is remarkably consistent: love, inclusion, engagement, even with those who might be considered enemies. Norman Finkelstein represents a different kind of militancy than Sister Souljah, but his challenge to West is structurally similar. Where Sister Souljah says, stop trying to work with white people who want to destroy you, Finkelstein says, stop trying to include people who are complicit in genocide.
Very concrete and succinct. When the IDF enters a city, should it kill every single person in the city 47% of Israeli Jews said yes to that question. Another question was, do you believe there are any innocents in Gaza? Any innocents? It was asked of Israelis across the board, including non-Jewish Israelis. 62% said there are no innocents in Gaza. If you factor away the non-Jewish respondents, it would come to about 70%. If you turn to Gaza now, Israel, for better or for worse, it has a citizen army. That means that army is representative of Israeli society. That army is carrying out a genocide. Every member of that army, E-V-E-R-Y, every member of that army is complicit in genocide. If it's not, as doctors have attested, if it's not targeting the skulls and chests of children, if it's not bombing the hospitals, bombing the schools, bombing any infrastructure in Gaza, the water and sanitation facilities, then they're involved in the systematic, methodical starvation, verging on famine of the people of Gaza. Now, when students, or I should say, when IDF soldiers come after their stint in the army to Harvard campus, or there are Jews who are publicly defending a real-time genocide broadcast across the social media, the bulk of the report's recommendations are, we must be inclusive. We must be pluralistic. We must embrace everyone. I say no. They should be shunned. They should be ostracized. You ought not to be inclusive of child killers. You lose me there.
Finkelstein, and pardon me if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, because I'm assuming that it's Finkelstein or Finkelstein, but I'm going to go with Finkelstein. But Mr. Finkelstein's argument is built on what he sees as undeniable moral facts. 47% of Israeli Jews support killing every person in Gaza cities. 70% believe there are no innocents in Gaza. Every IDF soldier is complicit in what he calls systematic genocide. His conclusion mirrors Sister Souljah's logic. They should be shunned. They should be ostracized. You ought to be inclusive. You ought not to be inclusive of child killers. Just like Souljah, Sister Souljah, rejected West's appeal to good white people, Finkelstein rejects West's appeal to inclusion and dialogue. When you're dealing with what we see as genocidal actors, moral clarity demands separation, not engagement. And just like Sister Souljah, Mr. Finkelstein sees West's approach as fundamentally naive, a refusal to acknowledge the true nature of the enemy you're dealing with. But here's what's remarkable. West's response to Finkelstein is almost identical to his response to Sister Souljah, just applied to a different context. To Sister Souljah's argument about white racism, West appeals to historical coalition building and the pragmatic necessity of working together. To Finkelstein's argument about Israeli complicity, West appeals to the dangers of shunning and a historical pattern of dehumanization.
The side of the galaxy. Do you believe that they should be inclusive of child killers? Students are obliged.
Is to shun, shame, or ostracize.
I'm
Now,
asking you, Cornel, do you feel that those students are obliged to be inclusive of child killers? I'm curious, because I know you're very inclusive. Maybe your tent stretches from here to the other side of the galaxy. Do you believe that they should be inclusive of child killers?
Yeah, that's a hell of a way of characterizing it, though, because you see, part of the problem here, brother, is that, the history of religions, which has been for the most part the history of barbarism in terms of institutional religions, they have specialized in shunning people. And once you begin to shun, then the next step is dehumanization, subjugation, and you're just redoing the same cycle that you yourself were resisting from the very beginning. If you shunned every American who supported the extermination of indigenous peoples, it's not a whole.
This is the same argument he makes to Sister Souljah about not giving up on coalition building. That separation and militant opposition ultimately reproduce the very patterns of exclusion and dehumanization that oppressed people are fighting against. West's most powerful moment in the Finkelstein debate directly parallels his approach with Sister Souljah. Just as he appeals to the necessity of working with imperfect white allies, he appeals to the historical reality of American complicity in genocide.
If you shunned every American who supported the extermination of indigenous peoples, there's not a whole lot of folk left in the history of television. If we shun the majority of Americans who supported the enslavement of black people, the lynching of black people, Jim Crow and Jane Crow, who's left? That's a small group.
No, this is a rhetorical.
This is West's consistent argument. If we apply the logic of moral purity and separation consistently, we will end up with no one to work with. Society is built on the participation of people who have been complicit in terrible things. But notice how this argument works differently in each context. With Sister Souljah, it's an argument of why Black people should work with white Americans despite their history of racism. With Mr. Finkelstein, it's an argument for why Americans should work with Israelis despite their current actions in Gaza. The logic is identical, but the political implications are completely different. The most revealing moment in both debates comes when West gets personal about his own reactions while maintaining his physiological position. With Sister Souljah, he doesn't deny the reality of white racism or the failure of institutions. He acknowledges the problems while maintaining faith in the possibility of transformation. With Mr. Finkelstein, he's even more explicit. He admits he would have a visceral, even violent reaction to child killers, but then he adds this.
Evasion.
No, it's not. I'm speaking directly to your question. I'm just not agreeing with you.
Would you cavort and carouse? Would you cavort and carouse with a child killer? I'm curious. I don't think that's a trivial question.
No.
You wouldn't.
No. That's like no.
You would shun them, correct?
I would do more than shun, brother. I'd probably cuss them out and lose my Holy Ghost and kick their behind in the name of Jesus. But the point is, that's not normative. That's not the only model that I want everybody to proceed. I want to love my way through the darkness. I don't believe in
and shunning, even given the crimes that people commit. If you got a different view, that's cool. I'm with you. We in the same demonstrations. We go to jail together, and we have fascinating conversations on child killers and how do you respond to child killers. That's all.
This reveals something crucial about West's philosophy. It's not that he doesn't feel angry or moral outrage. It's that he believes those feelings, while natural and justified, shouldn't determine political strategy. What emerges from these two debates is a fundamental question that goes beyond any specific political issue. When does inclusion become complicity? When does the refusal to shun become a form of enabling? Sister Souljah argues that West's faith in white allies enables white supremacy by refusing to acknowledge its systematic nature. Mr. Norman Finkelstein argues that West's inclusion of Israel's student enables genocide by refusing to impose social consequences of complicity. Both are essentially asking the same question. At what point does your commitment to love and inclusion become a barrier for justice? West's answer is consistent. Never. He believes that the moment you start shunning and excluding, you begin reproducing the very systems of oppression you're fighting against. What we've witnessed here are three distinct models of resistance and social change. Sister Souljah represents Black nationalist separationism, the belief that oppressed people must build their own institutions and stop appealing to their oppressors. Mr. Norman Finkelstein represents moral absolutism, the belief that complicity and atrocities demand social consequences and exclusion. Dr. Cornel West represents transformative inclusion, the belief that love and engagement, even with enemies, offers the only path to breaking cycles of oppression. Each position has its strengths and weaknesses. Sister Souljah's approach builds Black power, but may limit coalition possibilities. Mr. Finkelstein's approach maintains moral clarity, but may reproduce cycles of dehumanization. West's approach preserves human dignity, but may enable ongoing oppression. The question isn't which approach is right. It's which approach is right for which moment, which context, which struggle. These debates remind us that the most important conversations aren't always between enemies, but between allies who fundamentally disagree about strategy, philosophy, and the nature of justice itself. That's our deep dive into these intellectual battlegrounds. What do you think? Is there a time for shunning in the pursuit of justice? Or does love really offer the only way through the darkness? Let me know in the comments section. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Dana with the data. Dana with the data.